Now we move on to the next preference pair of sensing and intuition. Watch how Pauline uses the same steps as before to explore this pair of preferences.
Okay, let's move on now to the next preference pair, which is sensing and intuition. Now, it's important to remember that the words themselves can be a bit misleading. Sensing's not about being sensitive. Intuition's not about gut feel. These two words explain the way in which we take in information. So what kind of information do you prefer to gather? Which kind of information do you trust?
Okay.
So here we have a camera, and the sensing camera is zoomed in on a flower. It's looking at what's real. Sensing's all about what we can see, hear, taste, smell and touch. It's what's real. Over here we have a similar camera, but it's focused on the big picture. It's the context, and not focused on what's really there. It's looking at the bigger picture. So let's look at these two in a little bit more depth. Sensing is focusing what's real and observable. People who have a preference for sensing value practical applications. So they might have some ideas and concepts, but unless you can turn them into a practical application, then they don't value them. So they like to see something real coming out of the end. So they like things that are factual and concrete. They might notice things that are quite detailed. They notice and remember specific facts, not just a general awareness of what happened. They actually remember specific facts. They enjoy the present, living in the moment. They want information to be accurate. They value that. And they trust their direct experience. So if something's happened to them, they'll remember that. It's in the past. They can know and trust that because it's actually happened. It's real.
Okay.
Over on the other hand, we have intuition. Intuition is all about focusing on the bigger picture possibilities. So people who prefer intuition might actually value a concept just for the sake of the concept, and they won't absolutely have to have a practical application or a real change in the real world. Just thinking about that concept might energise them. So they like to be abstract and theoretical. They enjoy anticipating the future, so they might be thinking about the next thing rather than enjoying the present. They're stimulated by ambiguity, and they trust inspiring ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So to bring that to life a bit, I'd like you to hold your hand up like this in front of your face and look at it. That's a bit like you using sensing. So you're looking at what's really there. You're looking at the lines, the fine detail. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but when you're focusing on what's in front of your face, your hand, you can't see the bigger picture. So the background is out of focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Now focus on the background, and you'll notice your hand goes out of focus.
Yeah.
So that's a bit like you using intuition. You're looking at the bigger picture and the context, but at the expense of reality, what's in front of your face.
Okay.
So sensing and intuition are two very different processes of getting information, both equally valuable, but you can't do them both at the same time.
Yeah, I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's look at some areas where sensing and intuition might become important in your role, Paul.
Okay.
Again, there's 5 areas there. If you choose one that you'd like to start with.
Okay. I think I'd like to explore preferred instructions in more detail.
Okay. So that's this card. So what kind of instructions work well for you in your role?
Well, if I think back to my last one-to-one with my manager, certainly detailed instructions work well for me. I like to know what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, who I'm going to do it with, how I'm going to do it, and having that level of detail makes me feel comfortable going into something.
And what if your manager were to give you an ambiguous role and say, well, I want you to achieve this, but do it in your own way, see how it goes?
It wouldn't fit really well with me. I'd probably try and ask a lot more questions to get that level of detail from him. If I didn't get that level of detail, I'd probably add a bit of structure myself.
Yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And be quite proactive to actually, achieve whatever he is trying to achieve. But I definitely prefer getting a lot more detail up front.
Okay. So what would happen if you had to actually start without that and you weren't allowed to put it yourself and you had to sort of launch yourself into the unknown?
Where would I start? I don't know really what I'd do. I'd just I'd need to have some sort of structure in place to actually be able to start something. Otherwise, I wouldn't feel I'm adding value or being effective.
Right, okay. And is there any part of your role where you feel overloaded by too much detail?
No,
No.
not at all.
Okay, so you enjoy that?
Yeah, I thrive on lots of detail, really.
Okay, well, let's see what that means in terms of sensing and intuition then. Sensing here, it says people who prefer sensing prefer to be given step-by-step realistic instructions. They want to have specifics spelled out. They like instructions to be clear and accurate, and they may find non-specific instructions to be a bit too vague. Over here, intuition, people with a preference for intuition prefer to be given the overall purpose and then work it out for themselves. They want to see the bigger picture. They may not notice inaccuracies, and they're comfortable with ambiguity. And they may find detailed instructions quite limiting. So given that, which preference do you think you've used in that particular situation?
Well, I definitely think I prefer the step-by-step side of instructions for sure. I think the fact that I use my own initiative to sometimes put that step-by-step process in place when I do get a bigger picture, where there's a slight lean towards that way, but definitely the sensing preference.
Okay, so in that situation, preferred instructions, you think you use sensing?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at another card then. Okay, Paul, so we've spent some time discussing a few scenarios and how you use sensing and intuition. Let's now look at how you answered the questionnaire. If you make a record of what the questionnaire says. The MBTI sorted you into the sensing category.
Okay.
And it was quite confident that that was correct. So the box you tick is clear this time. So you were sorted into the sensing category by the questionnaire, and it was clear, not very clear.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Is that surprising or?
No, I think after these scenarios we've been through, that makes sense.
Okay, so taking that on board and remembering all of the examples that we talked about with the cards, do you think you're able to decide on your best fit type for sensing and intuition?
Yeah, I'm very sure I have a sensing preference.
Okay, so if we record that now.
Okay.
Great. Okay, now let's transfer that back to how you behave at work and remembering that you wanted to talk about your leadership style and valuing the diversity of your team. In which areas of your role do you see sensing serving you well?
Well, in managing the team, I think it's very clear as to what I expect of them, so they know where they stand as members of the team. So they've got very specific instructions about what they actually need to achieve, whether it be in a day or over a week.
Okay. And when does sensing work perhaps less well in that environment?
I suppose in that environment sometimes I can get too concerned with the detail, whereas actually the bigger picture might be more suitable to look at for a certain new initiative we might be focusing on.
Okay. And when do you use intuition quite well at work?
Sometimes we have brainstorming sessions, so we do need to look at the bigger picture. I'm very quick to then drill that down into detail, but I do try and have brainstorming sessions where we've got a blank piece of paper and we're looking at how we can actually improve things within the office.